Hi everybody, it's Dradog again. I wanted to do a follow-up video to the one I did last week on my Ultrasabers mystery box unboxing. I left that one with a few questions. I spent the last week kind of trying to get the answers, and now that I have them, I thought I'd share. And a lot of these questions can be answered if you do some digging. I'll talk about some of the sources that you can use online. It's not impossible. A lot of it just takes understanding the right language and the right words to look for, or go to the right place and just ask silly questions like I did. But the three big questions I had at the time were how do I program the saber? How do I add sounds or change the sounds? How do I change some of the mechanics behind it? Can I and how do I change the color of the blade? How do I charge the batteries? And how do I add a covertec wheel, which is a special wheel to enable you to clip it onto your belt clip? Those were kind of the big outstanding issues. And so we'll kind of take those in order. The first thing that I came across was the Ultrasabers launcher. So I'm using my Mac here, and this was software that I was able to download. You'll see it says Ultrasabers Launcher v2.45 on the title bar there. If you go to Google search, type in Ultrasabers Launcher, you'll find it. It's on their forums. I did have some kind of weird inconsistencies between the version numbers and what they were telling me to download and what I should download. But eventually I got it figured out. It really was just kind of following and finding, dates that were relatively recent. But when I did install it, there was a big option here to update the software. So I updated the software, and I think that helped as well. So this is the software to configure the Saber. One thing to note, it is PC compatible, it is Mac compatible. Now I have a PC gaming laptop, and that laptop runs at a very high resolution. And so like a lot of software I found, this is not an Ultrasabers issue, but like a lot of software I found on my higher resolution, the Ultrasabers app got really small and the text was really tiny. That is not an Ultrasabers issue. That is a Windows 10 font scaling with high resolution issue. I've run into this with World of Warcraft, so that should give you some ideas. This is not something that I'm holding Ultrasaber responsible for in the slightest. So once you get the software downloaded, then you want to plug up your Saber, and it actually was fairly straightforward. I noted it earlier. If you look on the battery pack, there is a micro USB port. It's one of the kind of bigger hexagonal or trapezoidal ones. Maybe it's a parallelogram. Could be a triangle. No, there's more than 3 sides. Yep, okay. It's one of those shapes. It's not one of the flatter ones that you see these days. It's more boxy. And that was a cable that I had lying around pretty handily. If you don't, you can definitely pick one up off Amazon. It was no big deal. But you plug it in, and in this case, I'm plugging it in just to a USB-C converter box for my MacBook Pro, because my MacBook doesn't have USB slots on it anymore. So once I get it, once I have it plugged in, I turn it on. In this case, I've actually already turned it on here. What I'll actually do is I'll disconnect it. So you can see it's turned on. I'll turn it off. I'll turn it back on. So now I'm on. And now I'm going to just come over here to the software, and I'm going to click connect. And you'll see it kind of flashed, and you can see that the lightsaber has now gone off. Now, the lightsaber is working. It's definitely all working. It's connected, and I can come back here to main, and you can kind of see that here. It says here, device information read successfully. So there are 4 tabs here. I'll go through each of them right quick. The first, the obvious one, the main tab gives you status information. You can disconnect. You can reset your Saber back to factory defaults. You can do a firmware update when they issue them. Some resources, and then with this help and documentation, you can exit this app. So very straightforward. The next is the Obsidian soundboard. So assuming that your Saber has an Obsidian soundboard, this comes up, and I'm going to go through each of these settings because I do have an Obsidian soundboard and how to configure the sound. and this was a question I had before, is, can I customize the colors on my lightsaber? Well, so here's the Emerald LED driver. So if you have an Emerald LED set up in your saber, this is where you'd come in to configure it. And there's a lot of different options to load. You can change colors, and if you have a lightsaber compatible with this, you can test it, and you can see my test button's grayed out. So no testing for me. Mine's a one color lightsaber, and that's fine. It's still really great, and I'm really happy with it. Similar vein, if you have the diamond controller, they do have a diamond controller tab here so that you can control all of your diamond light and sound systems that come in the upper end Ultrasaber sabers. So it's all here, very easy, very straightforward in one place. In this case, I'm going to go back to the Obsidian soundboard, and we're going to go through a bunch of different options here. And this is really where I think you're going to spend a lot of your time, at least initially. And with this software, and this is, again, not a criticism of Ultrasabers. I think this is fairly true with many of the saber companies who give you software to customize your saber. You make a change, you put it to the hilt, then you unplug the hilt, you try it out, and you come back, you make some more changes, you hook it back up, make the changes, and reiterate, and keep revising until you're happy. The challenge there is it does take a little bit of time, but I think once you've dialed it in, unless you're just, you're changing between, Sith Lord one day to Jedi Knight the next, I don't think you're going to be in here that much. So once you have it set to where you like it, you probably won't be here that often. With that said, I always recommend, if this is your first time, you can load the defaults and save to file. And I'll just go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to load the default settings, and you can see it's set everything up, and I can save those, and I can put them anywhere on my my laptop here. I will just throw it into Drive, and I'll just put it as default, and then I'll just save that in there. And that's using the factory defaults. I can also load from those, or however I want to do it. So now I'm going to go through each one of these settings. I didn't really understand what these settings were. So the first thing I did is I started Googling around, and I came to saberforum.com. So saberforum.com is a great community. It is literally just saberforum.com in your browser. You can sign up for a free account, and these folks can help you. And they are super nice and really helpful. They've been a giant help for me. And I found this great thread started by Rakana Nova, who actually talks about what each of these settings are. So I'm not going to read what he says, but I'm going to try to kind of translate it a bit for you. And the first is the motion threshold. And so I understand that to be setting up the sensitivity for the motion detector for basically the swooshing noise. So the wah noise, you want the wah noise. And I'm the type of guy who every time I swoosh my saber, I want to go wah, I want to go wah, wah. I'm not a big fan of big pauses between my wah, so I don't want the wah, wah. I want the wah, wah, right? Everybody wants the wah, wah. Why would you want a wah, wah? So with that said, this is one of those variables that controls that. The lower the number, the more sensitive this will be to your swishing around. And so I get kind of crazy, and I'm going to drop this down quite low. I'm going to try 40, and we'll see, because this is, again, something you have to kind of play with, and you come back and you adjust it over time and until you get to where you like it. The next value is called the motion integration time, and this is kind of tied to the sensitivity of the motion sensor as well, to kind of impact fake triggering. So the lower the number, the more sensitive the saber is, and the more fake triggers occur. So this really controls the sensitivity. And so I'm going to up this a little bit, because I don't want I don't want a fake wah. If there's anything worse than a pause between your wahs, is a fake wah. I think we can all agree to that. And nobody likes the fake wah. So I'm going to raise it up a little bit, so we have slightly more sensitive for the motion, but a little bit less sensitivity overall. The next one is the impact threshold, and this is tied to when you hit the saber. So again, if you're someone like me, you want to be able to smack that saber in your hands and make that crackle noise, that clash, bam. And so I lowered this down quite a bit. I'm going to drop this down to a 4 as well, just initially to see how I like it. And this gives me the, should in theory give me a good opportunity to get that clash to go off when I hit it with my hand. At the same time, I don't want every little jostle to make it go off, so maybe that may be too low. The bouncing time can help impact that. So this also decreases the sensitivity. So I'll push that up a little high because I'm going so low to try to balance those out. My numbers may be totally off, by the way. Don't trust the numbers that I've got here. And then the next one down is the minimum time between impacts. So this really sets it sets the reset speed of the impact sensor. So if you hit the saber to your hand and it goes clash, and then you hit it again and it doesn't, this is probably too high. And so I'm going to drop this down by quite a bit because I do want to be able to just kind of smack it in my hand or smack it on something and go clash, 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 clash. And I may even drop a little lower. So if you're interested, the numbers I have here, and again, these may not be good at all, is 40, a 4, 3, 65. I'm at 11 for minimum time between impacts. The last number is the lockup flash time, and this is only available on sabers that have that have the flash on clash enabled and not using the emerald LED drivers. So if you have that, that's great. If you don't, changing this probably doesn't adjust anything. I don't think I have this. I'm setting it down to like a 30, and I've got this enabled, but I don't think anything will happen. So I'm going to save this to a file, and I'm just going to call this, try one, and we'll save that down. And then I'm going to write this to the board, and so you'll hear comes on and it turned off. So I wrote it to the board, and now I've updated those settings. So the other really cool thing that you can do here is you can add custom sounds to this saber at least. And you do this to the sounds wizard down here. So there's a little option right here. It says sounds wizard. You click that and it opens up all the different sounds that you can put. Now I've only got one bank of memory. This is where I think it comes where it's like, yeah, it's a good idea if you can get a saber with more memory. You can load more different sounds on it. You can swap between them. In this case, I can do one bank of sounds, and that's fine for what I want. So the different options here are boot sound. And this is the sound that comes on when you first start up the lightsaber. You don't hear it that often. And for a lot of the sound files that I found, which I'll show you in just a second, it's usually naming what it is. So you're like, oh, that's the one I have on here. Power on sound is the sound that comes that happens when, believe it or not, when you power the lightsaber on. Very craftily named here, very, very tricky to get this. But don't be deceived by the power off sound, which is just the opposite, and the noise you hear when you power it off. Idle is your hum. Motion sounds is usually your swoosh swoosh. Impact is that initial clang or the clash when you bang it against your hand. Lockup sounds is the sound it makes when you do the lockup. So when you're like hooding at somebody else and you want to have that long crackle. Right sounds is not an actual sound, so don't be like, well, what would a right sound be? Is that when I use the saber to write with? Not so much. In this case, it's just a sound that you use to, or this is just the option you use to actually write the sounds to the saber itself. So now I know what you're asking. You're saying, Drylock, well, that's great, but where do I get these sounds? So again, we're going to Google a little bit. We're going to Google up Ultrasabers sound fonts, and I'll bring you to this page. So you just do Ultrasaber sound fonts, you do Obsidian sound fonts, whatever your favorite Google term is, and you'll get this. These are all free. And you can download them. Most of them were zips, some of them were RAR files, pretty easy to download. There are actually more here than it looks like. This Nova Star group here actually has a bunch in here to play with. And so once you've downloaded and unzipped them, you come back over here to the Ultrasaber. And you can really select any slot to hear them. They are of a file that most computers probably don't have access to. They're these let me get over here, these LSU files. Maybe you have an LSU. I did not have an LSU player. But still you can come in here and you can pick one. Now in this case, I'm picking, you'll see here there's a Sabertooth sound font. Now Sabertooth sound font is for a really cool Ultrasabers font that reminds me of a sword carried around in a Lightning Kitty science fiction extra hour cartoon show, which I will not name because I suspect it may be trademarked. but it's still a really cool saber, which I have my eye on because it's kind of neat. But the sound font for it is also really, really special. So the power on, I'll just let you hear the power on. And then you get the drum beats. Really cool. So imagine that when you turn your saber on. Again, not appropriate for my saber, but for that one, it's pretty cool. And then you can come through and load these up and you can mix and match. You don't have to use them all for the same sound font. If you want to combine sound fonts, if you like the power on from one and something else from the other, I suspect you can get pretty creative. I also understand there may be some more sound fonts on the forums. I haven't done a whole lot of digging, but yeah, they're there as well. So again, that's the software. It's actually pretty straightforward. This is the kind of thing that you just kind of have to play with. I'm still looking for like some really detailed instructions. Maybe I or somebody else will have a YouTube video that's like, okay, here's motion threshold at 10. Now here's it at 20. It sounds like a long day to me, but you know, maybe somebody will put it together, or maybe somebody has. So we'll go back to main, and now we're ready to kind of move on to the next thing. We did write to the board with the double check. Yep, right to the board. That's good. And so now we're ready to move on to the next thing. And so from here, what I'll do is I want to disconnect the lightsaber. And so the important thing to keep in mind when you're disconnecting any electronics, especially from computers, especially from Macs, is you always want to disconnect it from the software first and then do the hardware. So there's a disconnect button here. I'm going to click that and you can hear the lightsaber came right on. It's humming and purring. And I'm going to turn it off before I disconnect it. And again, that's not so much that I'm worried about the noise, though it is loud. What I am worried about is I don't want the any type of stray electronics to happen as I unplug that. So next thing I'm going to do is I want to set the camera down over here and just kind of lay it right here as I just come over here and unplug this. So you can see here, it's just plugged into the battery port. This is a pretty tight connector, and I'll show you this. So it's a pretty tight connector, and you can see the plug. It's one of the older kind of fatter plugs, but pretty easy to find still these days. And we'll set that aside, and you can see again, there's the port it goes in. Now, a note about the batteries. These are the lithium-ion batteries. They do come with it. And so here, I'm going to set the lightsaber down in front of me so I can get some camera action in here. And so that kind of leads us to our next question is, well, how do you charge these things? You do not charge it through this hilt. Now that doesn't mean that Ultrasabers doesn't offer hilts that you can charge these through. I believe that they actually do, and some of their other hilts you can. I do not believe this is one of them. There's no indication here that I can charge this. So as a result, you have to pick up a Li-ion charger, and so this is the one that I picked up. Now this is actually very similar, if not the exact same model that Ultrasabers offers on their website, or one of the models they offer on their website. I got a little impatient and ordered it from Amazon so it would get here overnight. Now something to note is the one I ordered is supposed to have a cable and have a cable that had a wall plug into it. Well, mine did not have that. Little bit of a bummer, but it does end in a USB. The cable does end in a USB connector, and I do have a lot of power strips with built-in USB in them. So I actually decided I really wasn't that worried about it. I did send a note over to Amazon, so they were aware of it, that the product description is incorrect. But ultimately, it wasn't a big showstopper for me. And so this is, so I'll remove the box here. And this is actually what the unit itself looks like. It's pretty dark. But you plug in the two batteries down here. You get a nice little display here, and it shows you how much this is charging with. Now, a note on these, and this is something, again, I learned on the Ultrasabers website. I don't have experience on this, so I'm assuming that they will know what they're talking about more than I will. They do not recommend putting these batteries on like a heavy charge. It sounds like anything more than 0.5 volts, and I could be talking wrong here, could cause problems long term. That said, I was hoping to get a unit that I could actually adjust. Again, this one does not allow me to adjust the voltage, which again is feedback I've given to Amazon. But that said, I'm unlikely to leave these in here. I tend to be pretty cautious when it comes to recharging batteries, so I would recharge these, pop these batteries out, and set them aside until I'm actually going to use them in the lightsaber. and maybe flesh them up right quick before I do put them in. So again, not big showstoppers. This also was not very expensive. I think I paid like $15 for it. So it's not the end of the world that it was missing those things. Not great. And again, kind of look at the descriptions, ask some questions, or optionally just go to Ultrasabers and buy it directly from them. So that's the charging question down. So we figured out how to program the lightsaber and how to charge it. And then the last big question for me was this covertec wheel. And this is a wheel that connects to a belt clip. I'm turning it this way so you can kind of see. And of course, then I dropped the belt clip. So this is a wheel that connects to the belt clip, and you can kind of see this is the belt clip. It just clips right on. And this is, kind of cell phone technology. I don't know which came first, whether we were doing this for lightsabers first or for cell phones first. I suspect probably cell phones. But this model, because it was a mystery box, did not come with one of these installed, and that really broke my OCD quite a bit. I really wanted the wheel on there because I wanted to be able to walk around with the hilt on my belt when I'm cosplaying. I didn't want to have to carry it in my hands. So I did a lot of research and try to figure out what was I going to do. And in the meantime, I ordered a wheel from Ultrasabers. You can actually kind of see. Let me see if I can get up here. You can kind of see it's curved to the lightsaber, which is why I ordered one directly from them. You can order these off of Amazon with the belt clip themselves, but they're not curved, and I really like the fact that this was going to be curved to the hilt. Took it about a week to show up. Came with the hex screw, which was really nice. But again, I had no hole. I had no way to drill, no hole to put in there. And so I asked around, went to the Ultrasabers forum, went to Reddit and said, okay, epoxy, anybody? And the general consensus was, are you mad? Epoxy? Are you insane? Though there was a consensus that, yeah, you could do it, but it's probably still a bad idea. And I think that was fair. Epoxy for me, the reason I was looking at it is I was worried about drilling a hole. I'm worried about the electronics. I don't know how to do it. I don't have the tools. But the more I thought about the epoxy, the more I thought, okay, well, what happens if this breaks, if this chips and I want to replace it? Getting a new one on there is going to be really hard. In this case, if this breaks, I undo the screw, I put a new one in, Bob's your uncle, I'm done. So, as a result, I went ahead and I reached out to some people at work and said, hey, does anybody know how to do this? And I had a friend who's like, I don't, but I'm willing to give it a shot. I think I can do it. And once he and I got together, it was actually pretty straightforward. He had a couple of clamps that we applied to either end. We took off the emitter side of it, so we just had this part of the tube. We took off the pommel. We slid the battery pack out by quite a bit. We held the cabling down, and then he from the side just kind of drilled a hole. I bought it was about $12 off Amazon, a drill bit and a tap. He had a really nice drill, drilled a hole. We went really slow, took us time. It is aluminum, it's aircraft quality aluminum, it's pretty thick, but he took his time, drilled a hole, and then did the tap, and literally it probably took us all of about 8 minutes. Once he did that, we put the screw in, and we were good to go. So it was actually pretty painless, and I think if I had to do it again, I feel a lot more confident that I could do it. So if you're worried that this might be outside your realm of expertise, I guarantee it really isn't. And if I ever do this myself, I'll do a video because it really was quite painless. So in the meantime, I'm going to stand up the phone again, and I will put the pommel back on, and we'll see how those new settings took. So I'm going to feed this back in. I will tighten up the pommel. Again, I don't know, these settings may be completely whacked. I may hate them, but then I can come back and change them after a while. So now I'm going to grab it here, and then I'll grab the lightsaber and I'll turn it on. So we're good there. Oops. Yeah, so we're still not, oh, there we go, there's the swishy. So I'm getting some swishy noise, but I'm still not getting the level I want. Let's see if yeah, so I'm still not getting the tap I want either. So, clearly I still need to play with it a bit. I am getting the flash when I tap it, but I'm not seeing any change in the color. So I don't have flash on flash, which is kind of what we knew. But again, well, there we go. Maybe you need to warm up a bit. But yeah, it's just something where I'm gonna have to play with a bit, and you kind of know that going in, that you're just gonna play with them and until you get it to where you want it. I'll put it up on its speaker and make it really angry at me. And we'll power down. Yeah, but again, I'm super pleased with it. I think as my first custom lightsaber, I think I kind of hit a great sweet spot here. I'm really happy with the quality. I'm really enjoying the experience. This stuff's kind of like some type of drug where you just want to keep doing more and more. I definitely will be getting some more sabers in. I definitely will be doing some more video reviews. And I'll definitely be posting them up for the few of you who might actually be interested. If you do have any questions, feel free to get me on Twitter. I'm at Darth Dradog, so like Darth Vader, but Darth Dradog, and Dradog is spelled D as in dog, R as in Robert, A as in apple, D as in dog, D as in dog, O as in Oscar, G as in golf. So Darth Dradog is me on Twitter. I do tend to turn off my YouTube comments. But I hope you get something out of this video. I hope it was somewhat helpful. And I want to thank you for your time.